Hello, welcome everyone joining us. We're going to give a couple of minutes so that people can make their entry in, and then we will begin.
Are you guys okay if I don't mask up? Little humor there, little pandemic humor.
We're recording this, yeah, buddy. No jokes.
Oh, I might be back to normal.
Yes, looks good.
I was having some weird sci-fi ghosting stuff with my camera, so. All right. Well, I don't want to take too much time, and I'd love to get started for those of you who are here and those who are going to be joining us along the way. My name is Alicia Adler. I'm the Communications and Outreach Coordinator for Kitsap County DCD. Angela Hannes is also assisting us for Marketing and Communications. And we have several subject matter experts who will introduce themselves as we go along. For those of you who have joined us in previous webinars, welcome back. This is our last in the series. For those of you who are new joining us, welcome. And if you want to catch any of the previous webinars, they're available on our Start Here Land Use and Building Development Basics site. I will speak a little bit about the process. For those of you who are new here, we will introduce the information and present, and you will have an opportunity to have questions answered at the end. You should have a question and answer window that you can use to submit any questions you'd like answered. Angela will share some information on the chat window. That's not a great place to ask questions. It could get lost, so we ask that you please redirect all your questions to the question window. Just a little bit about myself. I've developed and redeveloped land in Kitsap County, so I know where you're at. It's exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. So I'm so glad that you're joining us on this particular series. So the Start Here project, as I mentioned, we've had several others. It's about basic level education resources to facilitate those the success of people, their land use and building development projects. It was funded by a grant, Improving Landowner Development Decisions, which was awarded to us by the Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. Is designed to proactively improve landowner development decisions and mitigate negative impacts to land cover, stormwater, and critical areas. A data mining effort pulled the last 3 years of land use and building development customers, yielding 635 unique individuals. A survey was designed and shared with this group that would identify customer knowledge gaps, inform outreach messaging content, pinpoint communication mediums, identify potential influence partners, while also assessing customer perceptions. And ultimately, the results remain to reach people before applying would be the best way to get results. This included increased awareness, improve site designs, reduce costly and timely missteps, and reduce natural resource impacts. And as I mentioned, we're gonna, this final is sort of a roundup of several of the things that we've covered in more depth, but it's an overview of the single family residence development And we like to call it Prepare, Apply, Manage, which you'll see in a couple places on our site as well. And to start us off will be Scott Diener.
Thank you, Alicia. My name is Scott Diener, Manager of Development Services and Engineering. That's the division that looks at land use, environmental analyses, land division, and grading and stormwater management. The DSE division essentially looks at the processes and permits needed to prep a parcel for construction. Obviously, for today's purposes, the first step is to find a piece of property. Kitsap County has a valuable tool that should be used when considering a piece of property called Parcel Search. Parcel Search is found at kitsapgov.com/DCD or by searching the internet for Kitsap Parcel Search. Once you are at the Parcel Search website, you can enter search information using a parcel number or what is also known as a tax identification number, or by the site's address. If a site is undeveloped, there's usually not yet a street address. I have chosen a parcel for illustrative purposes, and I'm going to share my screen. So does, Alicia, can you see my screen? Okay, so please bear with me during this exercise, as there are a lot of detours when navigating Parcel Search. I'll try not to get too far off the rails here. This particular parcel that I've chosen belongs to the State Department of Natural Resources. It's one of the parcels that makes up the Green Mountain Recreational Area. Lots of people use Green Mountain, lots of trails. So anyways, once I clicked on this parcel, this window popped open, and you also see that this window here also opened. This is the layers list and a legend that shows mapping symbols and colors. In the layers list, there are different themes that you can choose, and the most commonly used are county utilities, critical areas, general features, imagery, shoreline management, and zoning. If you discover that you have a shoreline management zone, then you'll want to reach out to DCD, because there are a lot more requirements when you're up against a body of water, and it can get complicated quickly. If you'd like to use imagery, and I'll just go to imagery real quick, we encourage people to also take a look at the 2012 imagery, because the 2012 imagery shows a lot of the ground features better with a thinner canopy. So I will go back to the general features. The parcel box information, this information here, has a lot of parcel specific information. If there's no development on the land, however, the information is pretty bare. But for developed land, each of the links in the window are all informative in their own way. The more important links are buildings and improvements right here, which describes physical structures on site and their age and size, and land and location, which shows current use, the zoning, and the jurisdiction. And if you see that there is a city that pops up in this jurisdiction, then you'll need to work with the city for permitting, not Kitsap County. You also see a couple links to photos and sketches here, if the assessor has taken any pictures or has sketch plans, as well as DCD permit information, which is intended to show past permits, but which has some limits on how far back it goes. Under the land and location link, there is a zoning button. This information right here is one dwelling unit per 20 acres. That's your housing density. Each of the residential zones will have a density next to it. When you click on this, it'll take you to additional information. Several informative guidance documents and brochures are available on this page, as well as the overall county code. There's lots to navigate here, and we just don't have the time to do that in this particular session. But know that there's plenty of information here to get you going on what you would like to do in a residential zone. I'm going to go back to my main map. And I'm going to talk a little bit about critical areas. Kitsap County has lots of rolling topography with various environmental features and soils types all over. We have what we call critical areas, which are shorelines, wetlands, slopes, and geohazards, habitat areas, and flood zones. Previously, DCD conducted a Start Here webinar on critical areas, and that is a good session to review for more details. On the DNR property here, you can see that it's fairly encumbered with critical areas. You can see that there's a non-fish bearing stream right here, and that there are also geohazards on site as well, seismic and erosion hazard areas. What is often prevalent but not shown at this site are wetlands. And I'll just drag this down a little bit, and you can see what wetlands kind of would look like if it were to exist. Looks like this right here. When a parcel shows it is encumbered with critical areas, it's best to get a hold of DCD to understand the next steps, again, as it can get complicated and there are additional permit applications, time, and costs associated with it. It's also important to note that not all critical areas are mapped, and some are hinted at by aerial imagery and validated on the ground. And it's always a good idea to walk a site to see firsthand what exists. When it comes to developing a parcel, especially one that is constrained, it's advisable to consider professional support services from people or organizations who have particular skill sets. For septic or sewer and water, it's advisable to start with Kitsap Public Health District. There are different water purveyors, and health can assist with well and water rights information where there is not a water purveyor. As to sewer, it is not generally available to homes in rural areas, and health keeps a list of septic system designers. In the urban areas, there is typically access to sewer main lines, but not always. An architect can assist with home design and plans, siting, and site plan preparation. Quite often, the architect is the project lead and coordinates development across disciplines, which can become challenging with substantially constrained or impacted parcels. And just a quick side note that much of our good land supply has been developed, and so what we are seeing increasingly is more challenging land for development. Now, for sites that require stormwater treatment to be designed, you'll need to contact a licensed professional engineer, and this will be touched on in a moment by another speaker. An arborist can advise what trees should come down and how to take them down. Often the removal of trees and their stumps for home development requires a tree harvest permit and a site development activity permit, or an SDAP, which would be needed to regrade the site. There is a previously completed tree harvest webinar that is available for viewing for more detailed questions on tree removal as well. For a site with wetlands and shorelines, often you'll be required to consult with a wetlands biologist or a habitat management specialist or a similar professional. And for sites with slope, landslide, or erosion hazards, you may need to contact a geotechnical engineer or somebody similar. So we understand that building a house can be complicated, and the presence of trees, critical areas, and challenging stormwater treatment can cause site preparation to take longer and cost more. But DSC is available a number of ways to help navigate these issues. And I'll let Veronica talk about these issues.
Thanks,
you.
Scott. So yes, I'm Veronica Basson. I work at DCD in the Permit Services Division. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that communication component that Scott made mention of. So at any point along the process of designing or planning to build a new home, someone might need some assistance. There might be a point at which there's a question that comes up or someone needs direction, and we are here for that. Over the past few years, we've greatly expanded our virtual options for the convenience of people in the community that are in this situation. Long past are the days, if you've done projects like this or building for a long time, where you had to drive down to our office and just sort of sit, get in line and wait, whoever knows how long until the next person was available that you needed to speak with. So we've got live chat for a substantial amount of hours each week. Of course, you still can come in person. We offer a free meeting option for 15 minutes. These are those one-on-ones. I needed clarification or direction, or I have a question with building reviewers, planners, as Scott talked about, environmental or land use, the stormwater staff, and of course, fire marshal's office, and permit technicians as well. Permit technicians are the ones that actually process applications, and they process many hundreds of applications, and they often have insights. And if anyone feels stuck and they're not maybe sure which reviewer to even go with, a permit tech can often point people in the right direction, give some helpful hints, and answer questions. Next, we do have some paid meeting options. The most popular by far for building a new home is our staff consultation meeting. As opposed to the one-on-ones with the 15 minutes, the staff consultation meetings are a group meeting, and we will provide a representative from each of the divisions that are represented here today, and you can see in the list, and we will go over the project and try to give as much guidance and direction, especially if there are bigger or more complex issues. We don't like surprises. As someone building a home or being an expert in building the home, the contractor or other agent, nobody likes surprises. So the staff consultation is a good opportunity to sort of lay everything out and just hit every element at a higher level to give direction going forward. And the staff consultation, if a permit is applied for within a year, that fee goes as a direct credit to the permit fees. So that's another benefit of that. Moving forward in the process of actually preparing, applying, and managing a permit to build a home, our website is laid out with these three elements in mind. If someone were just in the preparation stage, they're not quite ready, they don't have their plans yet necessarily, or they're sort of at a preliminary stage, we do have some submittal matrices where you can look in a chart, see what your project is, and see the elements that will need to be turned in to apply for a permit. The site plan, as Scott talked about, and as all the other reviewers will also talk about, the site plan is such an important component of submittal. Everybody uses it, even through inspections, that we have a whole brochure, and we did a webinar just on best practices to prepare that site plan with all the information we need to approve the permit and meet code requirements. So that is also there in that preparation phase. Applying for the permit, we have an application portal that has made it a lot easier to enter the property information, answer some basic yes or no questions about the project, and get a customized list based on your zone and the size of the home and the way that you'll lay out the home. And the portal also helps you manage your application materials. Again, way in the past, you used to have to kind of compile a tall stack of paper. And even when we started online permitting, you had to sort of organize all the documents and upload them and hope you got everything right. Our new portal is configured to help you give you a custom list of what exactly needs to be turned in. There is a lot of information there at your disposal, but again, we're also there to help. And then lastly, once you've got a complete application, the permit tax will take that application and those materials, all the information you've given us, and we'll turn it into a permit number. And at that point, you can pay the minimum fees to get it going and in queue for review with the technical review staff. And at that point, you will use our online permit center, which we've had for years and years, to follow progress. We've got tools for timeframes, and ultimately get to the fun part, which is issuing your permit and moving forward with construction. Tips for success. Obviously, during this time, the biggest issue is timing. When do I need to get this permit applied for in order to get it issued at the right appropriate time for financing and get it built within your goals, timeframes? So the sooner the better that someone can approach our department with questions and get to the point of preparing and applying is recommended because of our timeframes as well. And so just earlier, the better. We do have, again, we acknowledge permitting can be complex, especially if someone hasn't done it before and they're new to this industry and the terminology. We do have lots of information, lots of brochures, but if you're not seeing something, please don't hesitate to reach out. That's what we're here for. That's what our jobs are, is to take in these projects, review them for code requirements, and let someone move on. So at this point, I will be passing on to Sammy to talk about stormwater.
Thanks, Veronica. My name's Samantha Long. I'm the engineering supervisor with the Development Services Engineering Division here at DCD. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the stormwater review process. Every project that comes in starts with a filled out stormwater worksheet. And the stormwater worksheet asks questions about where your project is located. Is it located within an urban growth area? Are there critical areas on site like a wetland, or maybe it's located in what we call a critical drainage area, as well as how much hard surface you'll be adding. And this area takes into account your roofs, your driveways, porches, and deck areas for your new construction of your home. The worksheet also goes through flow charts that'll help you determine what kind of drainage review will be required. And depending on the type of drainage review, you may be able to put together the site plan yourself. And I have an example here of a site plan on the left of the screen. The site plan should show information such as critical areas, the topography of the site, location of improvements, the area of soil that you'll be disturbing, as well as any BMPs proposed for stormwater mitigation. The BMPs on your plan should show how you're going to handle water runoff from those hard surface areas, such as the roof, lawn, and other hard surfaces. Some of the most used BMPs that we see for single-family residences are infiltration trenches, dispersion trenches, and rain gardens. And in this particular example on the screen, they're proposing a dispersion trench for the roof area and sheet flow dispersion for their driveway area. You'll also need to provide what we call a stormwater pollution prevention plan. This usually includes a written narrative as well as a map that'll go over the BMPs that will be used during construction to reduce muddy water from leaving the project site. We get a lot of rain in Washington. So containment of the water, especially during construction activities, is very important. A lot of times people will put this information together with their site plan instead of having a separate plan. And in this particular example on the screen, the applicant is proposing silt fencing around the project's area of disturbance. Now I'd like to move and segue to other stormwater review permits that may be required, like a site development activity permit. Depending on the scope of work, there are some projects that need to have what we call an SDAP. This requires the site plan and drainage report to be developed by a licensed civil engineer. And there are some construction activities that will trigger an SDAP right off the bat. For example, grading more than 150 cubic yards, working in the county right of way, as well as connecting to the county stormwater facility. If you'd like to know more, we have a Start Here Stormwater webinar video, and it contains more detailed information about what triggers an SDAP. And that video can be found in our land use building developments page of our website. Now I think it's a great time to pass this on to building review with our Fire Marshal, David Lynham, to touch on that subject.
Good afternoon. Really glad to join you today. My name is David Lynham, and I'm the Kitsap County Fire Marshal. I've got a few things that I want to talk to you about today when you're thinking about building a new home in our county here, and that's some of the fire requirements are going to be for your new home. Basically, we've got our access, we've got our fire resistive construction. I want to talk to you a little bit about having fire hydrants and alternatives for if some of those things are missing, which could involve sprinklers. The homes that we build today are vastly different than the homes that our parents and grandparents grew up in. We don't build homes out of whole sticks of lumber anymore. We use trusses. We use a lot of chips of wood that are pressed and glued together. And what's in our homes are very different than what it used to be. Our homes are filled full of plastics, all kinds of synthetic materials. They burn much hotter and they develop much more quickly. And with the lightweight types of constructions that we have today, it's really imperative that we make for sure that all of the required fire resistive construction is in place in our homes. We have separations that are required between our house and our garage. Many of us don't use our garages for parking vehicles anymore, but it's kind of a multi-purpose room where that may be something where you have some storage items out there. Perhaps you do actually fit a vehicle in there. Perhaps that's where you work on your vehicles or do any other types of maintenance projects that might happen in your home. We also require that we have smoke alarms throughout our house. That's probably one of the biggest things that you can do to guarantee your future safety, is to make for sure that those are installed and operable inside your sleeping rooms and outside in the hallways as well. We also require carbon monoxide detectors to be present in all of our homes, so particularly those where you use any type of a fuel burning appliance. It's very critical to your safety. So when all those are combined, we still have to worry about times when the situation goes from bad to worse, and you really do need the help of one of our fire districts or fire departments within the county to come and help you out. And even though we have a lot of things in the home that can help you today, there's two things that there just is no substitute for. One of them is access. Our firefighters have to be able to get to your property. And the other one is water flow, water supply for firefighting purposes, the fire flow. It doesn't do any good to be able to get to your property if we don't have any water to help you once we get there. So regardless of whether or not you live in a home, or you're going to buy a piece of property that's in a platted development, or maybe you found that small piece of land that's out in one of our rural areas that's just perfect for your dream home, you have to consider access. Can we get to your house? In a plat, it's not really as critical because the requirements for constructing your road have already been established, and the minimum requirements are to have roadways that are 20 feet wide, that they extend to within 150 feet of your property, and that they have an overhead clearance of 13 feet 6 inches tall. And again, in the urban areas, most of our roads are already constructed that way. But where you might get into an issue is in our rural areas. And this picture that we have here is a great example of some of the roadways that are in our rural areas. And in this one here, we got an engine from Central Kitsap Fire and Rescue. You can see that that roadway that's providing access there is just barely enough for one piece of fire apparatus to get down. Our fire code has requirements that you need to provide this access that's 20 feet wide with turnarounds and up close to your place whenever you have more than a shared driveway. So that means if there's more than 2 homes that are served by a road, you need to think about what it's going to cost you to do some of the upgrades to provide the fire apparatus access on those roads, or maybe another alternative makes sense for you. Another piece of information that you'll need to look at that's critical to being able to get to your site is how steep that road is. And generally, if it's over about a 12% grade, the fire departments are going to have a rough time getting there, particularly in the weather, this snowy, icy weather that we've had this last week. Or if we think about last summer, when it was very hot and dry and the potential for wildfire was very great. You're also going to need a water supply, and that's in the form of fire hydrants. And the minimum requirement is 500 gallons a minute for 30 minutes. And again, in our urban areas where you have platted developments, that's usually not a problem. And the fire hydrants are built in when you buy your lot. But when you're out there looking at these pieces of property, make for sure that you look around and see the fire hydrants that are there and note how far away they're going to be. Because you may have the best access in the world, but without a water supply, the fire department really can't help you very much. Another thing to keep in mind is the size of your home. We're building some very large homes, particularly in our rural areas that exceed 5,000 square feet. And there can be some additional requirements for fire flow for those large homes. So some of the information that we get from builders and developers is that most of the easy land has already been developed. So you might have some unique situations that you're going to have to think about putting in some other type of alternative that's going to help you where you're unable to provide either the fire flow or fire apparatus access to your property. And most of the time that includes residential fire sprinklers. They provide a water supply, and they're very effective at putting out the fire and increasing your life safety. The biggest thing that they do for the fire departments is they actually put the fire out before they get there, so their need for a fire response is much decreased. So all of these things are things to keep in mind before you even start to design what type of home that you put on your building. And that, of course, is some very technical building review. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to our building official, David Kinley.
Good afternoon. My name is David Kinley. I'm Assistant Director for DCD, as well as holding the responsibility of being building official and floodplain administrator. So we're several hats here. I get the honor of rounding out our planning and preparation portion and begin talking about management of your project after it gets issued. So there's a bit of a misnomer at times. We're talking specifically about single family homes right now, but oftentimes people are doing additions and remodels that are going to have some of these same criteria that we have to meet. Oftentimes there's the thought that, well, you really only need to know about the structural, like I only need a permit if I'm doing structural modifications. The reality is the building code talks a lot about life safety items. And David spoke to that just now regarding smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms in the new 2018 International Residential Code. There's also a requirement for a heat detector in an attached garage that is interconnected with your smoke alarms. So there's criteria out there that need to be identified on your plans, not necessarily structural in nature. Other items to consider are egress windows are required in all bedrooms and on all habitable floors. There's also items such as stairs, rise and run, handrails required, if there's guardrails required. Those types of things are not necessarily structural in nature, but they very much so are life safety items that need to be identified on your architectural plans. Now, as we talk about architectural plans, people start asking questions like, do I need to hire an architect? That is not necessarily required. There is a requirement to have certain type of information on plans. We'll need floor plans, we'll need elevation drawings, we'll need a lot of those details that identify the life safety items, as well as energy code and ventilation requirements. Plumbing and heating fixtures and equipment need to be identified on your plans. So that typically is shown on what we would consider an architectural set of drawings. In tandem with that would be a structural set of plans, oftentimes designed by an engineer is one way of doing it. There's also a prescriptive method. If it's a simple type of home, normally the code will provide good direction on how to build a simple home. Usually we're talking the squares and rectangles, not a whole lot of modulation in the walls, and certainly not offset between stories and that type of stuff is really the way you would do a prescriptive type design. So by and large, most of our homes are engineered. Talk briefly about the Kitsap County design criteria. We talk about how to design a structure per the code, and we have to give you upfront what the Kitsap County local requirements are for structural and other types of design. So we talk about gravity loading. We've got a snow load requirement of 25 pounds per square foot. We have a wind criteria of 110 mile an hour, which is the ultimate design for that. And then we're also in a high seismic zone D2. There isn't much beyond that. So there's quite a few things to consider when you're designing your home. Additionally, site plans play into this a lot. That tells us where's the home on the property. There's certain criteria for maybe fire resistant construction if we're too close to property lines or other structures. So those are things that we have to consider on the site plan. We also want to know where you're at in terms of ascending or descending slopes, because we have to stay back from some of those for landslide hazards. So those are all items that we would identify on the site plan, in addition to some of the things you've already heard about today. So at this point, we have issued a permit. You've provided us all the documentation, all the information has been through a review by all the subject matter experts, and now we have issued you a permit. So what do inspections look like? We get a lot of questions regarding inspections. We've recently developed some new materials to help provide additional guidance and clarification. So we've worked hard over the last year. We've provided inspection type descriptions. We've also have some checklists that our inspectors utilize that we're providing access to on our website. They might be more technical in nature, but they would certainly serve as a guide for anybody to look at prior to calling for the inspection for that type of inspection. One example would be we have plumbing and mechanical checklists for rough-in. We also have framing checklists for different portions of the structure or different phases of the structure, whether that be an underfloor inspection or if it's a house framing inspection, as well as what we're looking for at final inspection. Timeline of inspections, we're typically within the 48-hour window when people request an inspection. They'll get confirmation. This can be under two different ways. Emails are sent out anytime we do anything with that inspection request, including the day of when the inspector goes in and selects whether that's going to be an AM or PM inspection. Furthermore, we have our permit portal that you can log into to manage your permit. As you log into the Kitsap County permit portal, you can see all aspects of your permit, what inspections are done, what inspections have yet to be completed, and by and large, that can work as a guide for what comes next. You can also check on status of your inspection, like whether it's going to be today or tomorrow, AM or PM, once it is scheduled for that day. The same goes for inspection results. You'll receive an email, because what happens is the inspector will come out, conduct the inspection. They'll input the results of their inspection right after that inspection to say it's approved, or if there's any corrective actions that are required, that information will be input into their report, which is then emailed to you. The exception to that rule of it being input right after the inspection is we're highly dependent on cell phone signal, because all of our tablets that we utilize are connected via the cell network. So if there's a weak signal, that inspection result could come later in the day when they're in a spot where they can input that result. So that would be the one exception to that. Some people have questions regarding virtual inspections. We do have a virtual inspection program that we're trying to utilize more. How you would qualify for a virtual inspection would be to ask the inspector if you have any corrective action that needs to be taken place on that inspection. You can ask the inspector, hey, there's a couple items, would this qualify for a virtual inspection? The inspector can authorize that at that point in time, and then you can schedule a virtual inspection online. We have information on our website regarding how to do that as well. So those are all good options. That cuts down on time frame of reinspection, because oftentimes you can't schedule a reinspection immediately until you have the result, or the next day. Oftentimes the inspection schedule is already full, and so it could be a couple of days, whereas a virtual inspection can be done next day. Very important in the management of your project is when Kitsap County building inspectors come out for an inspection, all the county approved documents must be on site. So we work in a virtual environment where all of our plan review is done electronically. All the information is given back to you electronically, but we still need all of that data to be printed out, all the documents to be printed out on paper and on site. So it's very important also, if you've got a regular plan set of 24 by 36, is usually a standard set of plans, that it's printed out in that medium. It needs to be the size that it was designed at. So we need to have all that documentation on site: architectural, structural plans, structural calculations. If there's any geotechnical reports or any specialized reports, we want to have all that stuff on site for review at the time of inspection. One thing that we've done that's new, that's going to be launched here next week for the beginning of the year, is any project that is issued after that point in time will also have the Kitsap County cover sheet. And what we've done is put together a cover sheet that has basically a summary of the project on it. Makes it easier for our inspectors to find specific criteria for your project. There's information about what type of drywall inspection is required for this project. There's also descriptions of all inspection types, as well as providing information regarding virtual inspections on it. So it's a new thing that should help with the process. It kind of will give you a bit of a guide in terms of hierarchy and chronological order of inspections as well. Final inspection is something that often is questioned, like, what do I do for a final inspection? We highly recommend that prior to approaching your final inspection, within a few weeks of that, you need to start reviewing all your documentation. Get into the permit portal and review all the conditions on your permit. Review any special criteria that might have been placed on it by your engineer or a geotech, or if there's a requirement for soil amendments, or if there's a requirement that you have a paved road approach to a county right of way. Those are all things that need to be that you need to be aware of prior to calling for a final inspection, because we will review that on our end for a final inspection request. And we try to do 72 hours, have everybody review, make sure we have all the documentation. If there's a final report from the engineer, if there's a final report from the stormwater engineer, that we need to review and make sure that it meets all the criteria of the conditions on your permit. We do that within those 72 hours and then determine whether or not we can conduct that inspection. So very, very important to check all the conditions. Documentation, I think I touched on that, but you need to make sure that all of the documents that are part of your conditions are submitted through the permit portal prior to that final inspection. So I think that about rounds us out, Alicia. So I'll turn this back over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So I know you guys have heard a lot of information, and we've had to condense information just to get through this point in time. So Angela has been very helpful, including chat information links in the chat window that you can follow through and look at your own time. As I mentioned previously, if you registered for this, we will send an email with the follow-up resources as well. It's just a lot of information here and really important stuff. So what I'd like to do, if right now we have some time, we have about 15 minutes left. And if you'd like to ask some questions, it looks like a couple of you have already begun to do so. And make sure that you're using the question and answer button and not the chat window, because we would like to make sure we can get as much of your information as possible. This also helps us if we run out of time and your question was not addressed. We will try to get back to you as much as we can. And once again, thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over so that our subject matter experts can help you guys out.
I guess I'll start. And please, other members should, leadership team members, please jump in. But we got a question about the best timing to schedule a staff consultation meeting. It looks like someone does know they will need an SDAP or a site development activity permit. So they're wondering when is the right time to fit in that meeting type. Really, the sooner the better. Again, the staff consultation is designed to give big picture overview. And if you're about to embark on the application process, if you're starting with the SDAP, there may be some input we can give you. I mean, there's really no wrong time, but the sooner you want to engage the department in that comprehensive way and get some good direction on what's to come. So if you've already kind of prepared your SDAP, or you've had your professional do it, if you hired a civil engineer and they've already taken care of that for you, it's certainly okay to apply. We would not want to hold you back from that. But for generally speaking, again, if anyone else wants to weigh in, but I would say the sooner the better for the staff consultation.
Veronica, I can kind of add some information onto this regarding the SDAP portion of it. Really, the staff consult is an opportunity for you to get feedback. So I would say that the more design elements, and you have to weigh the pros and the cons, because I know it costs money to have to hire a licensed engineer and put together a plan, but the more that you have for us to look at and provide you feedback on, the more detailed information you'll be able to get. A lot of the times, if you come in with a general plan, what you'll get is general answers, just because we, without that detail, we really can't pinpoint some of the maybe restrictions or maybe some of the issues that might be able to come up. We could give you a general overview, but I think that to make your hour really worth it, if you can be as complete as possible with your plans or whatever other information you might have, you really be able to benefit from that time with speaking with a stormwater reviewer.
I'll just add that during those meetings, sometimes you might find that there was alternatives that you didn't know about, which might not require you to apply for a permit you thought you might have needed. So I concur that getting those meetings done earlier is better. Mr. Kinley, do you want to answer the next one about additional time required to comply due to COVID?
Yeah, I can take that. And I've got another one right after that I'll handle as well. So the question is there any latitude being given for, actually just disappeared, hang on a second. Is there any latitude being given to the additional time required to comply with COVID restrictions? We're not seeing any restrictions right now due to COVID in terms of how we conduct our business. What we are seeing is some supply chain issues out in the field in terms of being able to finish projects. Some of the things that I can think of are heat pumps. We're seeing some shortage of downspouts right now for some reason. There's just some appliances, refrigerators, stoves, that and the like. So we're seeing some of the supply chain issues there. There's also appears to be a labor shortage for a lot of the subcontractors that are causing things or delays in terms of the actual construction once you have your permit. Additionally, during the process of planning and developing your submittal items for permit, we're seeing that engineers, geotech engineers, architects have a backlog of work, and it can take some time to get through a project based on their workload. So yes, we are working with people. Long and the short of it is we're working with people in that. The key to that is communication. It really is, and letting us know I'm coming up on the 180 days that I'm due to have something back to you and permit review. Is it okay if I take another 30, 60 days, something like that? Yeah, we're working with people on extensions at this point in time. The key is not let your application or permit expire. Once that occurs, our policy doesn't have a whole lot of latitude on what we can do, and the code doesn't allow us much wiggle room. We usually have a 30-day grace period, but that's about it. So really want to not let it expire, but be in communication with us. So the next question I had here was for inspections during construction. Does our builder schedule those with DCD, or is that our responsibility as owner? The best answer to that is it's your discretion and really how you have worked out those details contractually with your builder. If the builder pulls the permit, oftentimes they're going to be managing that whole process for you. But if you pull the permit and you're paying them to build a structure, oftentimes there's something in contract language that would dictate that the homeowner would be responsible for that. I would just encourage you to work with your contractor on that. But great questions. Oftentimes we have those types of questions come in terms of responsibility, and we just encourage you to work with your builders. By and large, property owners, or as far as we're concerned, the county, the property owner is the person that is responsible for the project and completion thereof. But that's a great question. That's all I got right now.
I'll take the quick one. There is one about someone's going through the permitting process now for a new home, and they're asking at what point does the property get assigned an address? And is there any ability to choose the house number? So that's a really good question. Once an application is complete and it goes in queue for review with the technical review staff, one of those reviewers will be doing the address assignment. And usually it's somewhat earlier in the process, I would say within a few weeks of going in queue for review. And as soon as you see an address in the online permit center for your project, and that step signed off, that is the address for the property. And then as far as choosing the number, unfortunately, because when we assign an address, we have to plan for the future long after any of us are around. And it's, as you can imagine, you all, and some of you may have experienced this, to change an address later on can be quite disruptive. So the staff are guided by code to actually do some mathematical calculations as to what the address will be, and also be in alignment with the other addresses in the area and how big the property is and things like that. So unfortunately, it's a calculated number and not something that can be chosen. So hopefully that answers that.
I have another one here, and team, I see also there's fire flow question in here. There's some zoning questions as well. So have a look in there. But in terms of this question, it says, I'm planning a replacement house. Where do I look for the permit process for this? So great question. This is actually a pretty similar process to just building a new development. And it's funny, but Alicia could probably speak to this because I know that she did a redevelopment project as well, and give you her firsthand experience on this. But replacement home, a few things that are different about it is obviously you have a home there already. There's two things about that. If you're going to build in the same footprint where that house is at, and it's a non-conforming structure. In other words, it doesn't meet setbacks or some of the current things that we would require by current code. If you demolish that home, you have a year to secure a permit in order to replace it. And so that's something that to keep in mind. Our code requires that non-conforming use be replaced within a year. So oftentimes you'll want to hold off on the demolition of those homes until you're ready to actually start the work. The other thing is, if you have a home and you are putting a new home in a different location, it's still a replacement home. We have to keep in mind that most of our zoning only allows for one structure, one house per parcel, and it means that other home is going to have to be demolished at some point. And we usually give 30 days after the completion of the other home. So it gives you time to move from one into the next, but then it needs to be taken down at that point in time. So a few nuances that are different. The great thing about that is oftentimes you're not, as long as you're within that 1 year, I think it's 1 year, you don't have to pay impact fees. You don't have to, such as school, parks, and roads. So there's some benefits to doing a replacement project versus a brand new, but the process is going to be about the same for that replacement home as it would be for a single family residence, just with some of those nuances. And we have that process delineated on our website and through the permit portal. It should be about the same.
I'd agree with that. I just like to add that it is much the same on a lot of that development steps. It just happens that you have some of them completed. And some of the cases, for example, are you on a septic? Is that enough to meet your next home's plans? Those are the things you want to consider. Other than that, I found my process was very similar to a raw land conversion.
Thanks, Alicia. That personal experience is invaluable.
So it looks like we have a couple of minutes. I don't know if anybody, it looks like David, Mr. Lynham is typing an answer about fire flow. I don't know if you wanted to say that live or if we could take one more question before we wrap this up.
I sure can. Looks like Bill asked a question. He wants to know, is there a fire flow checklist to use to review during the feasibility phase on a piece of property to determine if fire suppression system is required? So the first question that we always ask when people go out there, this is a frequent question for us too. We don't have a checklist per se, but the first indication for you is whether or not the property is served by a public water purveyor. Chances are, if you've got a water purveyor there, a lot better chance of having fire flow than if you're on a well. So if you're on a well, generally you're not going to have a fire flow, and we're going to have to think about something else. And secondly, if you've got a water purveyor, the next thing will be is to contact that water purveyor and ask them whether or not fire flow is available and where the closest fire hydrant is. So that's good. Both of those things are good information to have, and every permit that comes through, the fire marshals have a look at that. That's two questions we're going to ask: is where's the lot? Is the water available? And if so, how much is there? The general requirement is 500 gallons a minute, unless you have a home that's over 5,000 square feet. And then we'll probably have to talk about some other alternatives or some additional requirements.
I've got one question here, and it's
Let's make that our last, because we're getting right to the end. So I will take everyone else's questions and copy them over, and we will try our best to get back to you.
Great. The question has to do with timeframes of turnaround for permits, and this is a hot topic, especially in 2021, where we've exceeded all other years that we have been tracking this data in terms of permit submittals. We have more building permit submittals this year than all other years. In fact, we crested that early October. So we have basically 2 months in excess of all other years. So we've seen timeframes vary this year from 45 days upwards of 90. And right now, I know we're probably, we had a few permits that were some outliers, but by and large, we're sitting at 60 days right now. So we're working diligently to knock that down. The holidays don't do us any favors. So that's why I think we're a little bit higher at this point in time. But a lot of times especially this week, we have a lot of staff that are off. So that does not help us with those timeframes. I would say if all of your documents and permit submission is in order, then we're looking at probably in that time frame right now, 60 days is what I would anticipate. With the just understanding it can be longer depending on how many permit submittals we have in. Good news is we've also issued a record number of permits this year, and so it just happens to be that the submittals are a little bit higher than what we've been able to produce. So those timeframes are higher than we want, but our typical timeframes right now are in that range.
Just to squeeze in one more thing to piggyback, I know, Alicia, we're out of time, but someone also asked about the time to intake the permit before it even gets to technical review. And it's the same situation. Through 20, we were holding under a week. And this week, I believe we're at 2 weeks. So again, trying to divert all resources to taking in the complete applications and getting them in queue for review. But that's our stat now. And we're also looking at a place on our website to publish those numbers so people are not left wondering.
All right, thanks everyone. Thanks to all our subject matter experts for taking your time and sharing your information, and all our attendees who came during this weird holiday, middle of ice and snow, and joining us. I really appreciate seeing all of you on here, and we'll see what 2022 brings for sharing more information. And those of you who did not get your questions answered, I have taken your information and we will do our best to get back to you as we can. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Be safe too this week.
Happy holidays.